Thanks for tuning in, folks, and welcome to space. Looking at the daily space weather, starting things out at 171 angstroms. We see a blank solar disk except for a giant coronal hole that's associated with the North Pole as well as crossing the equator. You can even see it in the 171 angstroms view, but more interesting than that, there's some activity in the North Pole. We'll show you the X-ray flux in a minute. Now, yesterday we covered a coronal hole that looked a little bit like Big Bird. Shout out D. Reynolds from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Anyway, that is one giant coronal hole, followed by a more diffuse coronal hole there. And we've seen a bunch of earthquakes kick off during this period. No real surprise there. Again, there's that bright spot on the North Solar Pole there, right in the middle of that North Pole coronal hole. And let's look at some more stuff. But first, let's talk about the 10.7 centimeter radio flux. This is a radio measurement of the outer corona here, folks. And this goes in line with sunspot number, currently at 68 solar flux units. Still solar minimum conditions, although off of the lows of 66 that we've been seeing during this particular solar minimum. Next, we're going to go to the Gong 2 to look at the magnetic environment as data is gathered from more than 50 ground-based magnetometers as well as stereo A and stereo B. You do notice on the far side of the sun that there is a bit of a polarity tug of war going on over there, probably because of activity south of the equator. This data is 1 hour and 46 minutes old, and keep in mind magnetic environments can change with absolutely no warning. Let's talk about September, which is Disaster Preparedness Month, and David Dubine's new book. Do you watch Adapt 2030 on YouTube? Adapt 2030. Check out his videos. He talks a lot about things like crop losses and prepping and growing your own food and so on. Let's take a random excerpt from the book as a teaser. Let's talk about greenhouse coverings. Proven over several decades to be a long-lasting and durable film, strong, insulating, and resistant to hail damage, gale force winds, or heavy snow loads. Air bubble greenhouse coverings. Much more resistant to large damaging hail and heavy snow loads and other greenhouse coverings. In use has lasted 20 plus years versus 2 to 3 for normal tunnel house coverings, and far less expensive than polycarbonate. Anyway, check out the book. We've got links to it in the description. And yes, our YouTube channel is cited in the book as David watches our videos. Now, X-ray flux is totally flatlined here. We have not seen even a B-class X-ray flare since July 7th. Let's look at the X-ray imager. As we're changing some stuff around with the videos here and being a little more selective about certain things, you're going to see some material coming in and out of the videos on a daily, as we're trying to keep this as dense as the brains of our viewers. And what we're looking at here is this area of activity here in the North Pole. That is a good sign for increased solar activity, as those of you who understand the implications of solar minimum probably realize that solar minima are unhealthy. As some of us are worried about the planet getting colder, as that's what kills people and causes crop losses, not the world getting warmer. And the real-time solar wind is displayed before you. BT/BZ are pretty convergent on the zero line there. That's the top pane. Phi angle very high, and we would expect to see a magnetic connection with that system of coronal holes at any point. So we wouldn't be surprised if we saw ongoing connections here around the 180 line. It looks like we were largely spared from the magnetic connection there, probably a result of plasma interactions from that coronal hole wind stream that hit yesterday. That's now ramped back down, and we're back to low to nominal levels here. 3.49 solar wind density. That's protons per cubic centimeter, by the way, is the units. We're talking protons here. And the solar wind speed, 391 kilometers per second. we won't translate into miles per hour today. Next, we're going straight to the USGS site to look at the earthquakes of the past 24 hours, and we see an uptick here north of Australia. Let's go through every one above a 4.0 magnitude. This one just about 24 hours ago, a 4.9 at Japan. Next on the list, about 1 hour after that, was another 4.9 at Japan. There's the first one, there's the second one. Followed by a 4.4 in Indonesia, and that looks like a pre-shock, folks. Next on the list, around 1 p.m. Universal Time yesterday, we see a 4.9 at extreme depth by Fiji. This area near Fiji, the prime location for extremely deep quakes. Been seeing them there for months. 4.6 at Haiti is next on the list. That one could have actually caused some damage. And a 4.0 in the mainland of Alaska. Please let us know if you felt that one. 4.6 at East Timor. That one is at extreme depth, 547 kilometers. Let's zoom in on that real quick. And there's the location of that deep quake in the Indonesian archipelago. Let's go back to the list. And there's a lot of stuff on the list. Next is a 4.5 at Greece. That one looks like it's in the Mediterranean. Here's a 5.3 at Papua New Guinea. There's a deep quake at Argentina. Check it out, 5.3 magnitude, 156 kilometers. If that happened at the surface, that would be about a 6.3 magnitude. Next on the list, 5.2 at Papua New Guinea. That one at 100 kilometers also. So we see an uptick in quakes here, folks, as well as some deep quakes kicking off once again. Still experiencing a 7+ magnitude earthquake lull. And don't lull, because if you're in an earthquake-prone area, you need to have a plan. Know which buildings might collapse if you try to evacuate yours. It could save your skull from being hit by a building facade. How about this 5.2 at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge? Very far south. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, folks. And a 5.4 right in the same location, not at depth, near the surface. A 4.8 at the Philippines is next. That one occurring at 8 p.m. Universal Time. Here's another deep quake at Argentina. Western South America is still my favorite spot for that next 7 magnitude quake kicking off. As we've been seeing deep quakes, this one 242 kilometers. 4.6 in Indonesia, that one is also at depth. And there's the largest quake of the past 2 days. I mean, the past, I'm not sure how many days. Ask Dutch Since if you want to know. Here's the location of that. Looks like it was very close to some land. And this does not even appear on tsunami.gov. Not sure how populated of an area that would be. Please leave a comment if you know anything about Indonesian geography. Again, 6.5 magnitude quake kicking off there. 4.3 at Iran is next on the list. By the way, that 6.5 happened right before midnight. 2346 Universal Time Code. And there's an aftershock from that same quake at a 5.4 magnitude. Here's a 4.6 at Russia. This one happening about an hour and a half later. And a 4.8 at Japan. The third in a line there. Next is a 4.2 at Puerto Rico. And last is a 4.2 at Indonesia. This one happening about 3 hours ago. That is from the time this video was shot. And we're just going to advance the pressure maps here, courtesy windy.com. If you see an anomalously moving low pressure system that's doing things like moving down a plate boundary or moving east to west instead of west to east, these are associated with increased earthquake risk, folks, especially when giant coronal holes shaped like Big Bird are facing the earth. There's where pressure will be in about 24 hours. And let's move on as there's more stuff to cover. We've set up massive page files on our computer in order to prevent any sort of memory failures. See if it's working. Looks like it's doing good so far. Salem is smooth unless you're near a volcano, because it's probably exploding. Mount Aso, currently producing a 6,000-foot ash plume. Tocono exploding, 7,000-foot plume there. Popocatépetl, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Popocatépetl. You can see that accent on the letter E there, meaning the accent should be on that letter, so it should be Popocatépetl. Not making it any easier for all of you folks who find yourselves unable to pronounce it. 20,000-foot ash plume there. Please don't fly your homemade ultralight aircraft over it. Revenador in Ecuador is still exploding. 15,000-foot plume there. Sabancaya exploding. 24,000-foot plume there. And Nevados de Chilean, who knows? Don't do a handspring over it. Could be unhealthful. Here's a section that we're shortening up. The magnetosphere movies were only showing the pressure, and only when there is something interesting going on are we going to show the other panes here, because this section is a pain here. Anyway, there's 4 hours of data, magnetohydrodynamic pressure. Since that's probably the most important variable there in the magnetohydrodynamics of the magnetosphere, we're just going to include that. Here's 4 hours of data of delta B. That's changes in the Earth's own B field, if you want to call it the Earth's own B field. We won't get into the controversy of how the Earth's dynamo is created during this video. That's something for an electric view conversation. And there's the GOES electron flux. We see a dip today once again, not as big of a dip, as there's still a slight electron deficit from the coronal hole wind stream. That should even out today. There are the relativistic electrons. Nothing too exciting going on there. Nominal levels off of a very high level. The highest in the past 30 days actually just happened about 2 weeks ago. As a result, we see no charging hazards. And I'm hearing strange noises. Hopefully nobody will attack me from behind while I'm trying to make this video. Here's the F2 map. Or you could say the ionosphere map. Hopefully it's just smAsho staff. Anyway, there's 6 hours of the ionosphere. There's the latest image. 8 o'clock UTC. Everything's looking pretty normal as far as that goes, according to me. Here's where stuff is in the solar system. And there's where stuff will be in 1 week. Here's where stuff is above my head, as this video was shot at 4:04. I like to draw in the ecliptic. If you want to make yourself a sky map, check out in-the-sky.org. And this particular one is the all sky chart. Just put in your zip code. You can even animate it, so you know when your favorite star will rise, perhaps, right? Today's featured object is Messier number 31, otherwise known as the Andromeda Galaxy. There's a lightning storm going on right now. Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. The Ozarks are getting hit, folks. If you're in Fayetteville, thunder is rolling in, folks. That's lightningmaps.org. That's real-time data. Here's a value-added service in the form of the U.S. Doppler radar map. And we will be zooming in on that area, as there are some jet stream interactions happening. Here are the jet streams across the west. And let me let that animate here. And we're going to zoom in on that area momentarily here. as there's some very powerful jets hitting the Great Lakes right now. First, we're going to look at the eastern jets also. And there are the jet streams of the eastern world. We see some extreme convective patterns going on here in the Indian Ocean. Things going the wrong way and doubled up and tripled up and 180-degree turns and so on. Meridional jet stream flow at its finest. That's what happens in a solar minimum. Now we're going to zoom in on the U.S. jet stream. And there's a scenario there. Very strong frigid air coming out of Canada. Went all the way down into Minnesota and so on, as well as the northern Rockies. And there's the U.S. water vapor map. We see a strong low there east of the Bahamas. And this massive pressure gradient happening here as a result of jet stream interaction, cold air, dry air, wet air, and so on, over Oklahoma. And we can zoom in and you can still see the timestamps, and then we're going to zoom way in, as there are some very interesting convergence lines happening here that are thousands of miles in length. And there's that Earth spot going on. Check it out. This thing is stagnating. It's practically standing still here. It's not rotating very much at all. And you can see that there's this line right here in the middle that's practically perpendicular to this overall convergence line. And that's not a coincidence, folks. That's what we call the Hall effect. If you don't know what the Hall effect is, do a web search for Birkeland currents and read the Wikipedia article. Hall currents are perpendicular currents that come out of an electrical field. So for instance, in any electrical power cable, for instance, you've got Hall currents coming out of there. If you can actually measure the current in the wire by measuring the Hall currents. We won't get into that, but yeah. Stay tuned for one bonus feature, folks. And we're looking at the solar North Pole here. We do see that bright spot there. This is not the X-ray imager again, folks. This is the 94 angstroms view from the SDO. And we'll look at the South Pole also. We see some bright areas down there. A small little prominence happening there right on the South Pole. All indications that solar activity is increasing. Welcome to cycle 25, and the predictions were well predicted, at least by this channel. We should be producing another video today, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Please support us on Patreon, as that is the source of funding for this channel, not YouTube. YouTube pays us precisely $0 for this. So become our next patron and get updates before everybody else. Anyway, we are out. Thanks again for tuning in. Please don't forget to press like and subscribe on YouTube. And please don't forget to share on your social media, since it'll never be now again. And in the meantime, may that solar wind be at your back and that atherosclerosis absent from your veins.